The first sound wasn't a siren. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't even the thrum of engines in the sky. It was a single broken voice on every channel, every frequency, every screen. The emergency broadcast cut through the quiet of the evening like a knife. Warning. Human Dreadnought inbound. Impact is inevitable. The words repeated, mechanical and cold, echoing through cities, villages, and even the black silence of space stations orbiting above. For most who heard it, the words didn't make sense. For those who understood what a dreadnought was, the blood drained from their faces. Dreadnoughts were not warships in the ordinary sense. They were titans of steel, humanity's oldest and most terrible weapons, each one the size of a moving mountain, armed with firepower that could level continents. They were built in another age, a time when humanity was clawing for survival in a hostile galaxy, a time when mercy was a luxury they could not afford. No one alive today had seen one with their own eyes. They were thought to be myths, half remembered from old battles and propaganda reels. Yet the broadcast didn't lie. Something massive was coming, and the stars themselves seemed to shiver at its approach, in the control room of a battered outpost orbiting a gas giant. Silence stretched between the crew as the broadcast faded into static. The commander's hands trembled over the console, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. He had lived through pirate raids, alien incursions, and blockades. But nothing made his throat tighten like those 5 words. Across from him, a young officer struggled to breathe evenly. The screen before them showed only a single red icon, crawling slowly closer on the star map. No fleet, no escort. Just one ship alone, advancing steadily on a collision course. Why would humans send that? The officer whispered, voice cracking. His people weren't human. Few in this sector were. The Great War had ended centuries ago, leaving most of the galaxy wary but respectful of the species that had clawed its way to dominance. Since then, humans had gone quiet, their fleets withdrawn, their colonies shuttered. Some said they'd turned inward. Others claimed they'd vanished into deep space, licking wounds or planning something unspeakable. Now, with the Dreadnought inbound, all the old fears rushed back like a tide dot. The broadcast spread faster than light. In the market squares of frontier worlds, merchants froze mid-bargain. In vast alien hives, millions paused in unison, antennae trembling with dread. On war councils and in hidden fortresses, leaders who had once mocked the myth of human steel found themselves staring at shaky reports and grainy images. The Dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a reminder. Humanity could disappear for centuries, but when they returned like a hammer deep underground. In a bunker shielded against scans, a group of resistance fighters gathered around a cracked holotable. They had been preparing for an invasion from rival species. Not this. The leader's voice was hoarse, edged with disbelief as he muttered, "If that thing hits the surface, there won't be anything left to fight over." Around him, younger recruits shifted uneasily, trying not to show their fear. One of them, a thin figure with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Then maybe it's not coming for us," they said. "Maybe it's coming for something else, or someone." Speculation became wildfire. Some said the Dreadnought was unmanned, a relic drifting from forgotten wars. Others insisted it was intentional, a warning from humanity. And some, in hushed tones, whispered the most terrifying thought of all, that the Dreadnought wasn't alone. Where one came, more would follow. The galaxy had survived countless wars, but no one believed they could survive the return of the human war machine. Meanwhile, on the outer rim, a mining station reported flickers of contact with the ship. Sensors burned out trying to pierce its shielding. The last thing the miners managed to transmit was an image, a silhouette, impossibly vast, crawling across the stars. Its armor plates glowed faintly, as if the ship itself had woken from a deep sleep. Along its hull, scorched writing could be seen, letters in the human tongue, scarred but still legible. Those who glimpsed the image before it was classified claimed the words were simple: "For when we return." The Dreadnought's approach distorted gravity wells, disrupting orbital paths and communications. Civilian craft scrambled out of the sector, while military fleets debated whether to intercept or retreat. Every council chamber filled with shouting voices. Dozens of worlds begged for answers, for reassurances. None came. The emergency broadcast repeated endlessly, as if mocking the silence of leadership. The only certainty was this: the Dreadnought wasn't slowing down inside a cramped shipyard. Near the edge of civilized space, an old mechanic stared at the schematics of the incoming vessel. His hands shook as memories stirred. Memories of war stories told by his grandfather, who had once served alongside humans. The mechanic whispered to no one, "They don't build ships like that unless they mean to end something." Around him, younger workers kept asking what could be done, how to stop it. The old man only shook his head. He knew the truth. Dreadnoughts were not built to be stopped. Fear rippled across the stars. But so did something else: curiosity. Who commanded the Dreadnought? What mission drove it forward after centuries of silence? Why now? On distant colonies, people leaned close to screens, unable to look away. The ship had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol. To some, it meant death. To others, it meant salvation. To everyone, it meant change. The broadcast looped again. Louder this time, filling every chamber, every hall, every private cabin across 1,000 systems. Emergency. Human Dreadnought incoming. Impact is inevitable. The words pressed down like a weight, but under that weight, the galaxy held its breath. Some prepared to flee, some prepared to fight, some prayed, and a few, the ones who had not forgotten, the ones who had studied human history in secret, began to smile. They knew what Dreadnoughts meant. They knew what was coming. As the ship drew closer, stars flickering behind its massive frame, a strange stillness settled across the sector. The Dreadnought didn't fire, it didn't signal, it didn't slow. It simply advanced, unstoppable, undeniable. Those watching felt the same thought crawl into their minds, unbidden. Whatever happens when it arrives, nothing will ever be the same again. The broadcast cut off abruptly, leaving silence where there had been warning. Then across every channel came a new sound, low, distorted, and human. A voice, ancient, tired but heavy with purpose. It spoke only one sentence, and the galaxy froze to hear it. "We told you we would return." And then, without warning, the signal ended. The Dreadnought loomed closer. The stars trembled. Impact was inevitable. The silence after the broadcast was worse than the warning itself. It stretched out across the galaxy, filling ships, stations, and settlements with a weight that made every breath feel heavier. The Dreadnought had not fired. It had not turned away. It had only spoken, with that low human voice that sounded as if it carried centuries of dust and shadows. "We told you we would return." Then it was gone, replaced by empty static. For many, the silence was unbearable, because silence meant the unknown, and the unknown was always worse than fire raining from the sky. On the orbital outpost circling the gas giant, the crew huddled in uneasy stillness. The commander finally forced himself to speak, though his voice cracked. "Trace every communication line. Find the source. I don't care if it's the ship itself or some ghost repeating an old signal. We need to know." The young officer swallowed hard and bent over the console. Their fingers moved quickly, but each line of code only led back to one conclusion. The transmission had come directly from the Dreadnought. Not a relay, not a projection. The ship itself had spoken. The officer's voice shook as they confirmed it, and everyone in the room felt the same cold realization. This was no relic drifting by accident. It was awake. Rumors spread faster than data. On colony worlds, taverns filled with frightened voices. In hushed corners, people argued over what the humans wanted. Some claimed the Dreadnought was returning to punish the galaxy for centuries of defiance. Others insisted it was a test, a show of strength meant to force old enemies into submission again. There were even whispers that the humans weren't in control at all, that something else had taken their ship and was using it as a weapon. Yet no matter the theory, fear was always at the center. On a frontier planet where trade routes crossed, an old historian sat in a dusty hall surrounded by texts that few cared to read anymore. He had studied humans for decades, long after most species decided their war-filled past was best forgotten. He knew the stories of the Dreadnoughts, ships built not only with weapons, but with will. Humans had once designed machines that carried their fury like a second soul. He remembered reading about one Dreadnought that had held a blockade for 2 full years without supplies, its crew refusing to surrender until their bones turned to dust in orbit. The historian whispered into the empty air, "If one has returned, then history is about to repeat itself." Across the stars, leaders tried to calm their people, but their words were hollow. Images of the Dreadnought's vast silhouette had already spread, captured by miners and scouts before their sensors burned out. The ship dwarfed everything around. It, a crawling fortress of steel with scars from ancient battles still etched across its hull. Its engines pulsed with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat that could be heard across systems. Those who stared at the images too long swore they could feel it watching them. Inside the mining station that had first spotted the ship, a lone survivor sat trembling. Their comrades had been lost when the sensors overloaded, systems collapsing, one by one. They had escaped in a lifeboat, and now their voice was carried through scattered transmissions. "It's not just a ship," they insisted. "It feels alive, like it knows we're here. Like it remembers." The message cut off mid-sentence, but it was enough to keep the fear alive. If the Dreadnought remembered, what else might it recall? The wars? The betrayals? The oaths humanity once swore before vanishing into the void? Meanwhile, fleets debated what to do. Some admirals argued for an interception, claiming that the Dreadnought must be destroyed before it reached a populated system. Others hesitated, their voices tinged with the weight of old caution. They knew what even one Dreadnought could do. To strike first might mean awakening more of them, hidden in deep space. Yet to wait meant risking annihilation. Every meeting ended in deadlock, no side willing to commit. And so the Dreadnought continued on, unchallenged, its steady advance a clock ticking toward some inevitable moment. On a remote world far from the core, a small group of humans still lived in isolation. Cut off from their own kind long ago, they had kept quiet for generations, blending into alien settlements, hiding their heritage behind false names and altered records. But when the broadcast played, something inside them stirred. One of them, a weathered woman with silver streaks in her hair, rose to her feet. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp with recognition. "It's one of ours," she said. "They've come back." The others in the room exchanged uncertain looks. To them, the Dreadnought was both a promise and a threat. It was proof that humanity had not been broken, but it also meant the galaxy would never leave them in peace again. Back in the outpost's command room, the young officer stared at the data feed, unable to tear their eyes away from the red icon on the screen. "It doesn't change course," they muttered. "It doesn't answer. It just moves forward, always forward." The commander clenched his jaw, remembering stories told by veterans long dead. That's how they built them. A Dreadnought doesn't retreat. It doesn't hesitate. If it has a mission, it completes it, no matter how long it takes. The officer turned pale. Then what's its mission now? No one in the room had an answer. As days passed, more systems began. to feel the weight of its approach. Communications flickered, travel routes shifted, and panic began to set in. Yet with panic came something unexpected: preparation. Old bunkers were reopened. Forgotten fleets were summoned back from retirement. Worlds that had been rivals found themselves speaking to each other again, united by the shared fear of what the humans might unleash. For centuries, the galaxy had lived without them. Now, every species realized how much of their fragile peace had relied on that absence. But the most troubling reports came from deep space explorers who swore they had seen more than one massive silhouette. The accounts were scattered, inconsistent, but the whispers grew. This dreadnought was not alone. Somewhere out there, in the dark between stars, others might already be stirring. And if they all awoke together, there would be no council, no fleet, no world that could stand in their way. Yet, through all the fear, a strange question burned brighter than any other. Why now? Why, after centuries of silence, had a human dreadnought returned? Was it an accident? A relic stumbling into populated space? Or had it been sent with purpose, its course set long ago by hands that knew exactly when it would arrive? Every answer seemed more dangerous than the last. The dreadnought's shadow grew larger on the maps. Systems cleared in its path. Fleets pulled back, and the emergency broadcast played less often now, not because the threat had faded, but because there was nothing more to say. Everyone already knew. The ship was coming. Impact was inevitable. And then, just as the galaxy began to resign itself to watching in silence, the dreadnought stirred. For the first time, sensors picked up a fluctuation in its energy output. Its engines roared, brighter than before, and its trajectory shifted ever so slightly, just enough to set a new course. Analysts scrambled to calculate its destination. Reports flew back and forth, confusion spreading, and then, finally, the answer appeared on every screen. The dreadnought was heading straight for a populated world. Would it strike? Would it land? Would it speak again? No one knew. But as billions of eyes turned upward, hearts pounding in fear and anticipation, one thing was certain. The wait was nearly over. The dreadnought's shift in course was like a thunderclap across the stars. Charts recalculated, projections updated, and every fleet that had been holding its distance realized the truth at the same time. The massive ship was no longer drifting aimlessly. It had chosen a target. The world in its path was not a military stronghold or a forgotten outpost. It was a thriving colony, filled with farms, factories, families, ordinary people who had never expected to be at the center of history. Now, they were staring at the sky as broadcasts repeated the warning. Impact is inevitable. On the colony, panic spread like wildfire. Streets clogged with civilians trying to leave, but there weren't enough ships for everyone. Families argued at docking bays, some willing to pay everything they had for a seat, others refusing to abandon their homes no matter what loomed above. Children asked their parents why the sky felt heavier, why the stars seemed dimmer. No one had answers. The leaders of the colony tried to calm the people, insisting that fleets would intercept the dreadnought long before it reached orbit, but their own eyes betrayed them. They had seen the projections. If no one stopped it, the ship would arrive in days. Meanwhile, in orbit above the colony, military ships gathered in an uneasy line. Their captains spoke over encrypted channels, debating whether to fire preemptively. Some argued that they had no choice. If the dreadnought landed or struck, millions would die. Others countered that to fire first would be suicide. Their weapons, though advanced, had never been tested against something built by humanity's war machine. No one wanted to be the one to test fate. So they hovered in silence, waiting for orders that never came. On the outpost near the gas giant, the commander stared at the updated star maps, jaw set tight. He had fought long enough to know that hesitation killed more quickly than any weapon. Yet the Dreadnought wasn't acting like an invader. It hadn't fired. It hadn't unleashed smaller ships. It simply moved forward, as if following a path, laid down long before. He turned to the young officer at his side. "Get me everything on that colony," he ordered. "History, settlements, industries. If the Dreadnought is heading there, it's not random." The officer worked quickly, data spilling across the screen. Agriculture, mineral processing, trade hubs, nothing unusual, except, buried in the records, was mention of a forgotten ruin, a site no one had touched in generations. Human in origin. Far below, on the colony itself, a group of miners huddled in a cave near those ruins. They had stumbled across strange markings weeks earlier, carvings in metal so old it seemed fused with the rock. At the time, they had laughed it off as another legend. Now, with the Dreadnought closing in, they looked at each other in dread. "It's coming for this," one whispered, running their hand over the scarred symbols. The others wanted to flee, but something about the markings seemed to hum, faintly, as if alive, and in that humming, there was a rhythm that matched the pulse of the Dreadnought's engines across the galaxy. The historian who had spent his life studying humanity sat, with his head in his hands. His research had told him one thing: humans never wasted effort. Their Dreadnoughts always had purpose. If this ship had set its sights on that colony, then the ruins there must mean something far more dangerous than anyone suspected. He rose from his chair, heart pounding, and began sending frantic messages to anyone who would listen. "Don't fire on it. Don't stop it. If you do, you may awaken something worse." But his warnings were drowned in the sea of fear and rage sweeping across the stars. Few wanted to hear about patience when millions were under threat. Inside the colony's main city, the governor sat in a dim room with his advisors. His people begged for evacuation, but the ships weren't enough. He knew that even if they tried, most would be left behind. He slammed his hand against the table. "If no one else will defend us, then we'll do it ourselves." His advisors looked horrified. The colony had only defense platforms and a small militia fleet, nothing that could stand against a Dreadnought. Yet the governor's resolve hardened. Better to die fighting than wait for destruction. He ordered every available weapon to be prepared, every volunteer to be armed. The city's streets filled with soldiers who had never seen battle before, their faces pale but determined. Back in orbit, fleets from nearby systems debated whether to intervene. Some feared that helping would only draw the Dreadnought's wrath onto their own worlds. Others saw an opportunity to show unity against humanity's shadow. Old rivalries stirred. Species that had once fought humans argued bitterly with those who had never faced them. Every council chamber was filled with shouting. While they argued, the Dreadnought kept coming. And then, for the first time, it sent another signal. Not words this time, but a sound, a long, deep tone that vibrated through every receiver, rattling bones and metal alike. It lasted less than a minute, but when it ended, every system went silent again. Analysts scrambled to decode it, pulling apart the frequency. What they found made their blood run cold. It wasn't just a sound, it was a key. And the key matched patterns buried deep in ancient human archives. The Dreadnought wasn't just approaching, it was unlocking something. In the cave beneath. The ruins, the miners felt the walls tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling as hidden machinery stirred to life. The markings glowed faintly, responding to the signal. One miner backed away in terror. "We shouldn't be here," they whispered, but another, drawn by curiosity, pressed a hand to the glowing surface. For a heartbeat, their eyes widened as if they had seen something vast and terrible. Then they screamed, collapsing to the ground. The others dragged them back, but the glowing did not fade. The ruins had awoken Dot in the colony's command center. Reports of seismic activity poured in. The governor demanded answers, but none came. The young officer from the outpost patched through a warning, voice urgent. "It's not here to destroy you. It's here to finish something. The ruins are the key." But his voice was drowned by the governor's anger. "Key or not, if it comes into orbit, we'll fire." His words echoed across every channel, a declaration that resistance would be made. The Dreadnought's engines flared again, its massive form looming ever closer. Fleets adjusted positions, weapons primed. On the colony, families hid in shelters, clutching each other as the sky grew darker with its shadow. Across the galaxy, countless eyes watched, waiting for the first strike. But none came. The Dreadnought remained silent, its course unwavering as though the galaxy's weapons were nothing but dust before it dot. And yet, deep inside its armored hull, something stirred. Sensors detected faint transmissions, heartbeats, voices, fragments of human speech. It was not empty. Something lived within. Something that had been waiting. The galaxy held its breath. The Dreadnought descended. The ruins pulsed brighter, and the choice loomed over every leader, every soldier, every frightened family, to fire or to wait. No one knew which would be worse. The Dreadnought's shadow fell over the colony like an eclipse, blotting out the sun as it entered orbit. Its size defied belief. Whole cities could have fit inside its hull, and still there would have been room left. Every telescope, every scanner, every frightened pair of eyes stared upward as the steel giant slowed, its engines rumbling like distant thunder. The emergency broadcast played again, though no one had triggered it. "Human Dreadnought incoming. Impact is inevitable." But this time, the words felt different. Not just a warning, but a judgment. In the colony's capital. Alarms wailed through every district. Civilians crowded into shelters, clutching children, clutching each other, trying to convince themselves the walls around them meant safety. The governor stood in the command center, his voice strained as he ordered every defense battery online. Operators reported that targeting systems were locked, but their hands hesitated over the fire controls. Everyone remembered the old stories. No fleet had ever truly defeated a human dreadnought. To attack one was to invite destruction. Still, the governor refused to falter. "If we don't fight, we're already dead," he said. His words carried across the colony's network, broadcast into homes and shelters. For some, it gave courage. For others, only despair. Above, the militia fleet formed a fragile line, their ships tiny sparks compared to the behemoth in orbit. Captains whispered prayers into open channels, their crews strapping in as weapons powered up. Yet no order to fire came. The Dreadnought did nothing. It drifted silently, vast and unmoving, its guns idle. The tension was unbearable. Every second that passed felt like the pause before a storm that could shatter worlds. On the outpost, near. "The gas giant!" The commander leaned over the holotable, his voice low and grim. "It hasn't fired. It hasn't spoken. It just watches, which means it's waiting." The young officer's hands shook as they scrolled through data. Waiting for what? The commander stared at the red icon pulsing on the map. For us to make the first move. He knew the psychology of war. Humans had built dreadnoughts not only as weapons, but as tools of fear. The longer it loomed in silence, the more likely its enemies would destroy themselves before it had to lift a finger. Meanwhile, in the ruins beneath the colony's surface, the glowing symbols pulsed brighter with every passing hour. Machinery, buried deep within the earth, shuddered awake, sending tremors through the ground. The miners, too afraid to flee, huddled together as they listened to the rumble beneath their feet. One of them clutched a datapad, pointing at the strange rhythm of the pulses. "It's in sync with the Dreadnought's engines. Whatever it's doing, the ship is connected to this place. Their voices echoed in the dark, drowned out only by the low hum that was slowly rising in pitch, as though the ruins were preparing to speak after centuries of silence. Across the galaxy, transmissions buzzed with frantic arguments. Councils debated sending reinforcements. Admirals argued over strategies. Spies whispered of hidden agendas. Some species urged restraint, fearing that to fire would doom them all. Others shouted for a strike, demanding the Dreadnought be destroyed before it awakened more of its kind. The tension rippled across borders, old enemies blaming each other for weakness, old alliances beginning to fracture under the strain. While they quarreled, the Dreadnought remained still, a silent judge above the colony. The historian, far away, on his quiet world, pounded his fist against the table as his warnings were ignored. He sent message after message, his voice hoarse. You don't understand. Dreadnoughts are not weapons of conquest. They are weapons of memory. If you attack it, you will awaken its purpose. If you wait, you may learn why it has returned. His words were drowned out by the roar of fear spreading faster than light. No one wanted to listen to an old man's stories when millions of lives hung in the balance. In the colony's bunkers, people clung to whispers of hope. Some believed the humans had come back to protect them. Others believed it was punishment, long delayed. Families passed down old tales they had once laughed at, about human fleets that turned battles by sheer will, about captains who swore their ships would never fall. Those stories no longer seemed like myths. They felt like warnings written in blood. Above the planet, the militia fleet shuddered as the Dreadnought moved. Slowly, its guns turned, not firing but aligning. The sight alone was enough to drive panic into the hearts of every soldier watching. On comms, voices cracked. It's aiming! But still, no fire came. Instead, another signal erupted from the Dreadnought, flooding every channel. It was not a voice this time, but a series of tones, a sequence of pulses that repeated again and again. Analysts scrambled to decode it, their hands racing across consoles. When the answer came, it sent chills through every command room. It was a set of coordinates. The ruins beneath the colony. In the caves, the glowing symbols flared to life. Panels long buried in stone split open, revealing black corridors stretching into the deep. The miners stumbled back as ancient machines stirred, their lights flickering like awakening eyes. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, through their bones, until one miner collapsed, clutching their head as if voices were pouring straight into their mind. The others dragged them toward the surface, but the ruins did not stop. They were alive again. The governor was told of the coordinates. His face paled, but he did not hesitate. Seal the ruins. Arm every explosive we have. If that's what the Dreadnought wants, then it cannot have it. Engineers rushed to obey, though their hands trembled. But the young officer from the outpost intercepted the transmission. Their voice cracked with urgency as they broadcast into the colony's command net. Don't destroy it. The ruins are linked to the ship. If you destroy them, we don't know what it will do. The governor snarled back. And if we don't, do you want to wait until it burns us alive? The argument echoed across the network, but no resolution came. On the colony's surface, ordinary people began to gather near the ruins, drawn by fear, curiosity, or desperation. Families carried what little they had left, some kneeling as if in worship, others shouting in anger at the silent sky. Soldiers formed a cordon, their weapons ready, but the crowd only grew. Above them, the Dreadnought loomed, unmoving, as though watching. In orbit, the militia captains finally received orders. The governor's voice cut through static, heavy with finality. If it descends any further, you are to fire. The words weighed on every crew. They knew what it would mean, yet they had no choice but to obey. Weapons powered to full, crosshairs locked on the Dreadnought's massive frame. Crews gripped their controls, sweat dripping down their faces. Still, they hesitated, praying that the order would never come. Above the colony, the Dreadnought shifted again, lowering closer to the planet. Its voice returned, thunderous, filling every channel at once. Do not interfere. This world was promised. The words carried finality, as though written into the very bones of history. Yet the alien frequency from the vault answered, rising in defiance, as if to say the promise was not unchallenged. Now, the stakes were no longer confined to one colony. The galaxy realized the truth. If humans had left vaults on other worlds, guarded by ships like this, then the entire balance of power was about to be rewritten. The Dreadnought was not just claiming one planet. It was reminding the galaxy of an oath made long ago, an oath no one remembered, but everyone would pay for. The colony trembled, the Dreadnought descended, and the vault roared. And in that deafening chorus of human and alien voices, the galaxy stood on the edge of revelation, or destruction. The towers that had risen from the ruins groaned like titans breaking free from chains. Dust and fire rose into the sky as massive panels unfolded, revealing a core of light that seemed far too bright to have slept beneath the soil for so long. People on the surface fled in every direction, though some stood rooted, unable to look away. The Dreadnought above answered with another surge of power, its engines flaring so violently the militia fleet shuddered in orbit. For a moment, the sky and the ground seemed to beat in unison, two hearts long separated now pounding together. The human voice returned, sharper than before. This world was promised. It will be reclaimed. Every council, every war room, every hidden chamber across the galaxy fell into silence as the words spread. It was not a warning anymore. It was a declaration. Humanity had not only returned, they had come to collect what they believed was theirs. The governor of the colony slammed his hand on the console, shouting at his officers to fire, but his commands were drowned by the sound of the vault itself. The alien frequency screamed louder, a metallic cry that made even the strongest collapse to their knees. It was not only resistance, it was rage. Then the earth split wide. From the heart of the ruins, something began to rise. At first, it looked like a mountain tearing itself from the crust. But as the dust cleared, the shape became clear. A vessel, half human in design, half alien, enormous even by Dreadnought standards. Its hull was covered in markings no one alive could decipher, and its engines glowed with a color that no star had ever produced. It had slept for centuries, maybe longer, waiting for the day humanity's signal would awaken it. Now, it stood, revealed, a second Titan rising to meet the one above. The militia fleet panicked. Captains screamed conflicting orders, some preparing to fire, others retreating. The Dreadnought above lowered closer, its cannons locking onto the half-buried ship. For the first time, it seemed to hesitate, as if facing not an enemy, but an equal. The voice on every channel faltered. "It was never yours." The tone shifted, fractured, as though two voices were speaking at once, one human, one alien, arguing through the steel throat of the Dreadnought. The historian, still connected to the chaos through distant channels, realized what it meant. His voice cracked as he tried to warn them all. The humans were never alone. They made pacts, forged alliances we never knew. That vault, it wasn't just storage. It was a covenant. And now the covenant is broken. His warning spread, but it was already too late. The rising vessel below fired first. A single beam of energy cut through the atmosphere, grazing the Dreadnought's hull. The colossal ship reeled, its armor glowing as the beam carved deep scars across its side. The militia fleet scattered in terror, caught between giants. Explosions rippled through the upper atmosphere as smaller ships were ripped apart by the shockwave. On the ground, windows shattered, cities shook, and people screamed as the two Titans finally began to battle. The Dreadnought roared, its cannons unleashing torrents of light that turned the sky into fire. The buried vessel answered, launching volleys of strange energy that bent and twisted through the air like living serpents. The colony was caught in the middle, torn by quakes, storms, and fire raining from above. Families huddled in bunkers, praying, while soldiers on the surface abandoned their posts to drag civilians out of crumbling shelters. It was no longer about defending their home. It was about survival. In the middle of gods at war. Inside the colony's command center, the governor finally broke. His face pale, his voice barely a whisper, he asked the question none of his people wanted to hear. What if neither side cares whether we live? The young officer from the outpost, still patched through, shouted over the din. Then we make them care. Humans or not, they're fighting over something buried here, but we're still here too. We won't be trampled. The governor stared at the young officer's face flickering on the screen, then nodded. His voice steadied as he gave new orders. Divert all power to shields. Evacuate as many as we can. And if either ship tries to land, we make them bleed. For it! His people moved, though fear lined their eyes. It was not hope, but defiance, that drove them now. Above, the Dreadnought pressed forward, driving the other vessel back with sheer firepower. For a moment, it seemed humanity's warship might prevail. But then the alien-human hybrid ship pulsed with a power unlike anything seen before. Its engines flared, and the Dreadnought froze in place. The hybrid was not just fighting. It was controlling. The realization spread like wildfire. The vault ship carried technology that could command dreadnoughts. Humanity had built it as a weapon, but the aliens had made sure it could never be turned against them. The dreadnought's voice fractured again, the human authority within it straining against something older, deeper. We swore to guard it. For a heartbeat, the galaxy understood. The Dreadnought had not come to conquer, but to protect. Humanity had left it here as a warden to keep the vault sealed. But the vault ship had awoken, and now the Dreadnought was forced to fight its own promise. The clash reached its peak. Beams tore through the atmosphere, firestorms ravaged the colony's surface, and shockwaves rattled orbiting fleets into chaos. And then, in the middle of the devastation, the unexpected twist struck. The hybrid vessel did not fire again. Instead, it opened. Panels along its hull shifted, unfolding into a massive aperture. From within, not weapons, but pods began to emerge. Hundreds, thousands of them, drifting down toward the colony. The Dreadnought roared, its guns turning from the vault ship to the pods. But too many were already falling. On the ground, people looked up to see the sky streaked with fire as the pods descended. They did not carry bombs. They carried figures, humanoid shapes, tall and armored, their forms part human, part alien, their faces hidden behind masks of steel. They landed in clouds of dust, marching across fields and streets, their voices rising in a chorus that no one could translate. The colony's defenders opened fire, but the soldiers barely staggered. The hybrid force pressed forward, their movements precise, relentless. Panic spread through the colony, even as the Dreadnought above tried desperately to cut down more pods. It was no longer a battle of ships. It was an invasion. The vault had not only been a tomb, it had been a cradle. On the outpost, the commander whispered as he watched the feeds. This isn't about reclaiming a world. It's about bringing them back. The young officer looked up at him, realization dawning. They weren't just guarding weapons. They were guarding people. A whole new species, bred from human and alien blood. The Dreadnought's voice came one last time, louder than before, carrying across every starship and settlement. We told you we would return, but not as we were. The galaxy froze at those words. It was not humanity alone that had come back, but something new, something greater, or something worse. The Dreadnought and the vault ship locked weapons, again tearing at each other in fury, but the pods kept falling, and the hybrid army kept rising. The colony, the fleets, the councils, none of them were ready. As the climax thundered on, one truth became clear. Humanity's promise to return had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. They had not come back as conquerors or saviors. They had come back changed, bound to something alien, carrying with them an army born from both sides of history. And whatever the galaxy had feared before, it was nothing compared to what stood now on the edge of their future. The battlefield was drowned in fire and silence. The Dreadnought floated above the colony like a wounded beast, its armor split and smoldering from the vault ship's attack. The hybrid vessel still loomed below, half buried in the earth, but its aperture had sealed shut after sending its army to the surface. Now, the world trembled under the clash of boots and screams where human alien soldiers marched through dust and flame. Civilians ran, soldiers fought, and everywhere the air was thick with fear. Yet through all of it, one truth pulsed louder than the explosions. Humanity had returned, but not in the form anyone remembered. The hybrid soldiers moved with terrifying unity, neither shouting nor hesitating. Their armor gleamed with the same strange markings that had lined the vault walls, and their movements echoed a discipline that felt unmistakably human. Defenders of the colony fired relentlessly, but the invaders pressed forward, shrugging off losses as if they were inevitable. Still, resistance did not crumble. Ordinary citizens grabbed weapons, soldiers pulled strangers to safety, and commanders held their lines, refusing to surrender. For all their terror, the people of the colony were determined not to vanish quietly. Above, the Dreadnought seemed to falter, caught between its mission and the chaos unraveling below. Its voice rumbled again, fractured but heavy with meaning. "We swore to guard, we swore to protect, but we swore never to yield." With that vow, its cannons turned not toward the colony, but toward the hybrid ship itself. Beams of fire rained down, hammering the half-buried vessel until the earth split wider. The ground swallowed whole buildings as the vault shook under the barrage. The hybrid ship screamed with that alien frequency again, lashing back with torrents of light. But the Dreadnought endured, its guns blazing in defiance. The historian's warnings were finally confirmed. In every council chamber across the galaxy, leaders watched the feed with pale faces. Humanity had not built these vaults as weapons to dominate. They had built them as prisons, holding the results of a pact that had gone too far. The Dreadnoughts were not meant to conquer, but to stand guard forever, even if their crews faded into dust. Humanity had returned because the vaults were breaking free, and the old oaths demanded they stop them. The galaxy had feared the Dreadnought as a threat, but now it was revealed as a warden. On the surface, the hybrid soldiers pressed deeper into the colony's heart. Families huddled in shelters felt the tremors of their boots overhead. Soldiers fought in the streets, pushing them back building by building. Among the chaos, the young officer from the outpost made it to the surface, arriving with a small group of reinforcements. They found themselves in the middle of a ruined city square, face to face with the advancing hybrids. For a heartbeat, both sides stared at each other. The officer raised their weapon, but then hesitated. The nearest hybrid soldier paused as well, its masked face tilting slightly. The officer spoke, voice breaking. "If you're part human, then you're not our enemy. You don't have to do this." There was no reply, only silence, and then the hybrid lifted its weapon. The officer fired first. The square erupted into battle, yet the hesitation lingered in the air like a shadow of something unspoken. Above, the Dreadnought and the vault ship reached their limit. The Dreadnought's hull burned with deep scars, entire sections venting, fire into the void. The vault ship cracked under the bombardment, its strange engines flickering. Then, in a single devastating exchange, both ships fired at once. The blast tore through the sky, a blinding light that blinded sensors and shook the world below. When the glare faded, the vault ship was collapsing in on itself, its structure folding like shattered bone. The Dreadnought remained, but barely. Its engines sputtered, its cannons silent, its frame broken. It had won, but the victory had gutted it. On the ground, the hybrid army staggered as their ship failed. Their unity faltered, their movements losing rhythm. Colonists seized the chance, launching a counterattack that pushed them back. Streets filled with smoke and cries as defenders forced the hybrids into retreat, some captured, others scattered. The invasion was broken, not destroyed, but enough that the colony could breathe again. In orbit, silence followed the battle. The Dreadnought drifted, crippled but still alive. Then, one last time, its voice spread across every channel. We returned not to conquer, but to keep the oath. This world was promised safety. It is yours to guard now. The words echoed with finality, a command and a farewell. Slowly, the Dreadnought turned away, limping into the void on failing engines. No one knew if it would survive the journey, but no one dared pursue it. The vault ship was gone, but its remnants remained buried in the earth, a warning to all. The hybrid soldiers that had not been killed or captured scattered into the wilderness, their fates unknown. Some whispered that they would return, rebuilt into something stronger. Others believed they might learn in time that they were not tools, but people with choices. For the colony, survival came at a price. Entire districts lay in ruins, thousands lost, but they had endured. The governor, once ready to fire blindly at the Dreadnought, stood before his people and admitted the truth. We thought the humans came to destroy us, but they came to keep us safe from what they feared as much as we do. His words, heavy and uncertain, spread across the networks. They were not victory speeches. They were confessions. The historian, far away, wrote his final record with trembling hands. He had lived long enough to see the myths proven true. His words closed with a single reflection. The galaxy has always feared humanity's return. But now we must ask ourselves what we fear more: the humans who guarded us, or the promises they made that we were never meant to know. Ships arrived to aid the colony in the days that followed. Councils argued over what to do with the captured hybrids and the fragments of alien human technology left in the ruins. Some wanted to destroy it all, to erase the threat. Others argued that it must be studied, that to understand it was the only way to survive what might come next. No agreement was reached. The ruins remained sealed, guarded now not by humans, but by the colony itself. As for the Dreadnought, its fate was never confirmed. Some claimed to see its broken silhouette drifting into deep space, fading into darkness like a ghost. Others swore that multiple signals had appeared in distant sectors, echoes of more Dreadnoughts awakening. The galaxy held its breath, unsure if this was an ending or a beginning. The colony rebuilt slowly, carrying scars both visible and unseen. Children grew up hearing the story of the day the Dreadnought arrived, of the oath humanity had kept even in silence, of the vault that should never have been opened. For them, it was not a tale of conquest or salvation, but a reminder that the past is never buried as deep as we believe, and somewhere in the void, among shattered stars and drifting wreckage, the hybrid survivors gathered in silence. They carried the memory of their awakening, the command of their creators, and the defiance of those who had resisted them. Whether they would rise again as enemies or seek their own path remained unknown. The galaxy moved forward, uneasy and changed. Humanity's return had shaken the stars, not with domination, but with revelation. They had not come back as the legends promised. They had come back with secrets, with burdens, and with shadows that stretched into the future. And in the hearts, Of all who had witnessed it, one truth lingered. The emergency broadcast had been right. The impact was inevitable, but what came after would depend not only on humanity, but on everyone who now lived in the echo of their return.